Hi, good evening. Welcome to the April 1st regular meeting of the Larkspur City Council. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Haroff,
Here.
Councilmember Hilmer,
Here.
Mayor Chu.
Here.
Let the record show that Councilmember Morrison and Vice Mayor Way are excused.
Okay, thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Tonight we have members of the Redwood baseball team here, and we have Coach Mike Ferenzi and the president of also the Redwood Boosters Club, and that is Bruce Cohen. Tonight we are here to thank the Redwood baseball team for their collaborative volunteer efforts in helping our Public Works Department remove weeds, plant new plants, put in weed barriers, and basically clean up the whole area in front of the entrance to Piper Park on March 14th, 2015. So I want to thank you for your community service, and also to Coach Ferenzi in encouraging our young adults to participate as citizens, and also to see a little bit of value in what community service means. One of the things, even the people up here who are elected members of the city of Larkspur, we're effectively volunteers. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get involved in your community. Hopefully we'll see you out there maybe coaching some of the young boys at the Twin Cities Little League or whichever league you came from. I did read this proclamation, which I want to be able to give to the coach, but formally recognize your team's efforts in helping the city. And this was presented actually to you back on March 14th, but I'll read it again into the record. It is a proclamation from the mayor of the city of Larkspur in recognition to the Redwood High School baseball program for their community service work enhancing the entrance to Piper Park. Whereas the Redwood High School baseball program has historically had a terrific legacy of volunteer service to the Twin Cities community. Whereas under the leadership of new head coach Mike Ferenzi, whereby he would like to reestablish this relationship and impress upon the players the importance of contributing to the community. Whereas Piper Park is the largest, most diverse, and heavily used park in the city of Larkspur. Whereas enhancements to the park benefits the whole community and contributes through volunteer efforts, demonstrates community leadership. Whereas under the supervision of Public Works Director Mary Grace Houlihan and her staff, that the varsity, junior varsity, and freshman teams each worked 3 shifts on March 14, 2015 to remove weeds, replace plants, install weed barriers, and add new bark in the area in front of the tennis courts. And whereas the mayor of the city of Larkspur acknowledges the hard work and efforts of the coaches, players, and parents on the Redwood High School varsity, junior varsity, and freshman baseball teams, and thanks them for their generous donation of their time. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the mayor of the city of Larkspur that Saturday, March 14, 2015 is Redwood High School Baseball Program Day in the city of Larkspur in recognition of their community service work and providing an example for others of what we can build together. So thank you, gentlemen. And I'd like to have Coach Ferenzi come up, and I can present this to him.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah, for those who are watching on TV tonight, I just want to encourage them to go out and watch Redwood baseball. They're 10-1 so far this year, and now it's the varsity, the junior varsity, and freshmen are also having equally successful years, I think at 8-3 and 8-4. So it'd be tough to match any team that's winning 3/4 of their game in this sport. So I guess what, you got San Rafael tomorrow, and good luck to you and for the rest of the season. So thank you very much. Okay, you're certainly welcome to stay and observe the public process, but we have our regular meeting, so we're going to go through some business items now. All right, thank you.
Go get them.
Okay, next on our agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Would either council member like to remove any items for discussion or consideration?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we have our city manager, Dan Swartz, for his oral report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. A few items for you this evening. The first one is we're now dealing with being on television and getting feedback from folks, and we've gotten feedback that sometimes the council members, you have been leaning back in your seats a bit, and then the mics lose you a little. So we've had a few requests from the public to be aware that sometimes you're not audible. So make sure you're getting picked up on the mic. Would be appreciated by your folks at home.
I'm probably the guiltiest about that, so thank you for that.
As we told you at your last council meeting, we're working with the consulting team from LMS Architects to schedule a third community meeting in which the public and the council and other boards and commissions can interact as we continue through the design phase for the new Larkspur Library and Community Center. We haven't yet been able to nail down a date, but I expect we'll be able to announce one here shortly because we know folks are anxious to hear when that date is and get it penciled in to their calendar. So please keep your eye on our website for an announcement shortly. I'm told that the pedestrian bridge that connects the Bon Air Shopping Center to the neighborhood behind it is in place. It's not yet ready to be open to the public. They're still doing some work, but you can now see the bridge. And thank you again to the Schultz family for their contribution to make that bridge happen. We very much appreciate it. There's another bridge project going on. A lot of you have seen it, the Central Marin Ferry Connector. I just want to take this opportunity to remind folks it's not a City of Larkspur project, and while we're happy to take phone calls about the project, our staff will direct you to the county, who are the folks actually managing the project. All in all, given they had a lot of logistical challenges on Friday and Saturday night, I think they did an admirable job with a very difficult project, but it's not an easy thing to put a prefabricated item over an active street. So thank you that they got through that. They kept traffic moving as best they could, kept the stoppages as short as possible, and nobody got hurt. And lastly, it's still too early for us to give you any Larkspur-specific feedback, but of course the governor made a rather significant announcement today mandating 25% reductions in water consumption. We haven't had a chance to digest what that means for us, but we'll be taking a look at that and giving you some feedback, as I'm sure will all agencies and private entities that are affected here in the near future. But certainly this is a hallmark day in terms of water regulation that they've gone to this measure at the state. So more to follow as we digest the full ramifications of the governor's order. Turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any questions for the city manager? I just have one on the last item. When you do speak to them, you should ask if the savings will be based upon current utilization or some other past utilization, because we've already made an effort to save water. So, 25% may be a bigger, more difficult number to hit if, we've already been saving a lot of water.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if they do it that way, you're better off, say, not saving water until they set the baseline, and that's not encouraging either, or motivation.
Just as a footnote, just some of the news reporting that I've heard on that today does indicate that there will be a lot of variation in the way different communities across the state will have to deal with it, and the kinds of concerns that you've just raised will be taken into account. So to the extent that there are communities that have already done a good job in reducing water usage, that will be taken into account quite significantly, I think.
Okay, that's good to hear.
That's just based on
Yeah.
general news reporting, but obviously we want to hear the details.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now's the time for council member reports and comments. Councilmember Haroff, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, a couple of things. Oops, get my mic back on. A couple of things real quick. Since I missed the last city council meeting, just report on a couple of things that I've done over the course of the last month. One of those, again, I continue to be active working on the board and various committees for MCE, and most recently have been reappointed to the ad hoc contracting committee for MCE. So we will be going through what they call the open season process beginning this month, where potential contractors will be submitting proposals to MCE for future power supply, and I'll be participating in the review of those proposals with other members of the MCE board. So I'm happy to have that opportunity to play that additional role within MCE once again this year. Second, last week I attended a working group of Marin delegates to ABAG. I attended that meeting as the alternate for the city of Larkspur, since Catherine Way was not available to attend. But I was happy to be there and listen to good information provided by ABAG representatives to the group that night. They made a real effort to come to Marin County with representatives from, I think, all but maybe 2 of the municipalities in Marin attending the meeting. So it was a very well-attended meeting and a lot of interest in what ABAG is up to. The main thing ABAG is up to now is getting ready for the next iteration of Plan Bay Area, which I think has to come out in 2017 or 2018. And they are just getting started in the process for doing that now. And in fact, over the next few months, 2 important things will be happening. One is they will be undertaking a process for gathering information, including information from cities, to help inform their evaluation of population, employment, as well as local policies by cities and counties that might affect how they put all that information together. So Dan, city staff may be engaged in that process. You're probably aware of that and that expectation at this point. That'll be important because the way in which land use and other planning policies figure into that can have a pretty profound impact on the way in which they conduct their preliminary analysis. So with that, as you get a little bit closer to that, Dan, we may want to make a request of you just to give us a little bit of an idea about the kinds of information that you're being asked to provide to ABAG, just so we kind of know how we're engaging in that process from the city of Larkspur's perspective. But that is a process that's going to go forward, and at the same time that the information gathering process will be going forward, ABAG will be engaged in a public outreach process over the next few months, and including a series of what they've described as open houses in counties throughout the Bay Area, and that would include Marin. The good news is, I think, as a result of various things that have happened in Sacramento in terms of the status that we have as a county within the larger Bay Area, we'll probably give it a little more special treatment than we got in the last Plan Bay Area round. But there will be a process that's going forward. There will likely be what the ABAG staff is describing as an open house in Marin in the latter part of May, so it's coming up. We talked a lot about the framework and the structure of these open house processes that ABAG is contemplating. There was a lot of concern that was expressed by Marin County representatives about how that might work and how we might be able to better tailor that process to meet the needs and interests of residents here in the county. As a result of that, we decided at the meeting to create kind of a smaller working group of 3 or 4 people, including myself. I was volunteered to provide a little bit of information to ABAG about what we think from a county perspective might work best in the public outreach process that ABAG intends to go forward with here in Marin County. Because of the timing a meeting in late May, it's important for us to be doing that work and giving them that feedback pretty much right away. So that process will be led by Pat Eklund from Novato. I'm on the committee. David Connolly is on the committee. I shouldn't call it a committee. It's more of a working group. And we'll try to provide some feedback to ABAG on what we think is important in terms of meeting the community concerns we have here in Marin County. So I'm happy to have that opportunity to provide that input. Finally, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, I've been kind of involved in a MCCMC working group on sea level rise. We meet about once a month, representatives from most of the cities that about the bay. So it doesn't really include Ross and San Anselmo and Fairfax. We've invited them to participate, but they haven't really shown a desire to do that. We have submitted input. Each of the cities participating now, including Larkspur, based on some information that the city manager gave to me earlier in the year. We've tried to educate ourselves about what the different cities have done about sea level rise in the past, brought that information together. We met once with county staff people about a month and a half or so ago, and we'll probably have another meeting now focusing on funding opportunities to do a countywide vulnerability assessment about future challenges from sea level rise. That process has kind of gotten started with the lead being taken by the county. City managers, I think, have been asked to provide some input into that. There's a little bit of a concern that we had within our group that there are a number of different elements in the process that are working on the issue but haven't necessarily coordinated to the extent that they ought to. So to help address that, we're going to make a recommendation to the county that we have another larger meeting that would involve not only elected representatives from the cities and from the county, but county staff and city staff as well, to the extent that they're available and able to participate, to make sure that we've defined the roles that everyone can meaningfully play in that process and create essentially, I don't want to use the word because it sounds kind of highfalutin, a governance structure for this process to allow it to go forward in an efficient and productive way. So we'll be setting up that meeting, probably again a meeting in another month or so. And we'll look forward to our city manager having some things to say about the role that we can play there, and happy to continue to play the role that I played in the MCCMC process. That's it.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Hilmer, do you have anything to report out on?
Just an expression of gratitude to former Mayor Larry Langto, president of the Larkspur Library Foundation, for the well-timed and clearly stated letter that he mailed to the community, inviting everybody to take part in the upcoming meetings, from a community meeting to the Planning Commission review, and then the City Council action on moving the Library Community Center project forward. I thought that was a very helpful effort on his part, and I want to thank him on behalf of the council and myself personally for taking the creative step to do that. I thought the letter, particularly coming from him, meant a lot to those he is in contact with and those who know him. So I think that will mean a lot to bringing people together around this effort at the right time, so we can start talking about putting resources, raising money, et cetera. And again, thank you, former Mayor Langto.
Okay, thank you. I just had one quick item, which is an update on the Marin Telecommunications Agency regarding our withdrawal from the MTA, which would be effective June 30th if we decide to go forward with it. Finance and Policy Committee met last night, and the recommendation that they're going to take back to the full board for their meeting on, what is it? We're in April now, so next Wednesday, April 8th, will be that they will try and address all our issues related to funding of projects or initiatives that are outside the mission of the MTA by reevaluating the strategic plan so that all the members are, one, in agreement with what it is that the MTA does, and that there is a structured way to deal with what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. So that is not exactly the alternative that we had suggested as our preferred alternative, which was to participate in projects on an opt-in or opt-out basis. So I've already talked to City Manager Dan Swartz, and we're going to try and get it on our agenda for discussion either on the 15th of April or May 6th, whatever is most convenient for you and your staff. Okay, if there are no questions on any other items, first I'd like to say Officer Khalili does not need to stay any longer since there are no members of the public. And that pretty much, unless you have something, there's no public comment either. Okay, thank you for coming. So the only other thing we have on our agenda tonight is a business item where there's a proposed amendment to the budget for the fiscal year 14-15 and just a general discussion of our fiscal status.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is an item we usually bring to you in late January or February. We held it back a little bit longer this year because we were auditing some of our accounts and finding some minor changes that you can see reflected in a table here, administrative errors that we wanted to correct as part of the budget amendments. These were errors that had been in our system. They got carried into the budget when we brought it to you back in July. But as we have in the past, we've brought you a summary of different budget changes that have been made throughout the year. Some of them I made administratively. Most of the larger ones are ones we brought to you for approval at the time, noting we would bring them for a mid-year adjustment to the budget. The most significant thing we did that was off the budget, it wasn't in the budget that we brought to you last June, was the technology improvements. And that was because at the time we weren't sure the extent of those improvements or the costs. And so we're bringing those to you now. You had already approved those in a previous item for us to move forward. And the staff, I can tell you, is very appreciative to have computers that can run software that they need to run, which wasn't always the case in the past. I thought it'd be a good chance for me to just briefly prepare you for the budget season and some of the topics that you can expect to hear. So for the benefit of folks at home more so than you, I threw together a few slides so we could have an outline of the topics. But this is just some topics and themes I want you to be aware of as we head into budget season. Some of them are actually apropos throughout all the agencies you're working with, some of them very specific to what we're experiencing here in Larkspur. There are some positive signs that we'll be happy to tout as we work our way through the budget season this year. One is that the property tax is holding to the levels that the county projected. And you'll recall during budget sessions in the past, your city staff, we always prepare budgets on a very conservative basis. And one of the areas we always wrestle with is the county property tax projections. They have actually an amazing record of being accurate with respect to their projections, but they got very bullish on the property tax coming back this year, and that made us a little bit nervous, but to the county's credit, their projections are looking spot on, so we should end up with a little more property tax at the end of the year than we built into our budget, because we kept that projection down to their most conservative estimate and didn't go with some of their more robust. And they're sort of hitting right on their main target level. So definitely kudos to the assessor for having a good sense of where the property tax is headed. And we're getting word out of the county that they're bullish on property taxes for fiscal year 15-16. They think that the turnover of property will continue and that reassessment upward will continue in Marin County in the next fiscal year, and that we should see some increase in property tax next year. So we're waiting to refine those numbers so that we can build them into our budgets. Ms. Houlihan and Mr. Toff, if he was here, would tell you they are very busy. And they are very busy because our bread and butter which is building permit activity, folks wanting to work on their homes. It is up and it keeps moving up. People are optimistic, they're investing in their properties again, and our counter staff is very busy right now processing all that. That means our fee activity is up, so that's a positive sign in our revenue base. Franchise monies are up. Another sign the economy's coming back. People are utilizing the utilities that we draw franchises on more, so we're noticing an upward trend there. And then lastly, Measure C is doing well. It's right on projections, if not a little bit better. It's basically working lockstep with the economy. The economy is up, Measure C is up. You recall Measure C is slightly different than our regular sales tax because Measure C, we actually pick up goods and services that are delivered to Larkspur but purchased elsewhere. So if you go buy a big television at Best Buy in San Rafael and you have it delivered to your house, we actually pick up the Measure C on that sale. We also pick it up on automobile sales, regardless of where the purchase takes place, as long as it takes place in California. So those have continued to trend reasonably well against the economy.
Just a comment, my old car died last week and I had to buy a new one. And what you just described, I learned was quite true. Because I bought the car in San Francisco and had to pay the Larkspur city tax.
Which we
Which
thank
I was
you
hap-
very much
which I
for
was
doing.
happy to do.
Yeah, so you know, that's I would not be surprised. As you know, I get to be a bit of a numbers geek, so I've attended a few seminars recently on trends in tax processing, which I'm sure just thrills everybody. But I actually enjoy this stuff, and you know, the technology's there to do what you're describing, and so we're finally having at the state level some interesting discussions about now that the ability to track where people live, where they use their products. Now we can do that relatively easily. Should we be looking at our tax models? And I think the success of sales and use tax extensions like Measure C and the ability to track that Councilmember Haroff bought his car in San Francisco is a sign that we're headed in that direction all the more as we continue to look at our tax structures. Now there are some trends to monitor in Larkspur, and actually our base sales tax has been flattening a little bit despite the improved economy. I attribute this because I've been picking through our sales tax numbers to try to understand what's going on, and what I attribute this to is that same boost in sales tax activity that I've been telling you about for the last 2 years that's been out in Larkspur Landing that's not related to Marin Country Mart, but rather to the office buildings and some of the smaller operations. They're either starting to see their own sales flatten or they've left. You know, I mean, we've talked about that before, that that's going to happen in some of those startups as they grow too big to stay in the smaller office complexes up there. But what I think is actually happening is that some of those startups generated rather significant revenue right away, and now they've reached more, I suspect, what are their pro forma numbers as they've settled in. And so we got this initial sort of nice boost with the arrival of these startup businesses, and now they're kind of where they are. It's not something I'm overly concerned about, but it's an interesting trend for Larkspur because I think the other aspect of our new sales tax is, with the exception of Marin Country Mart, a lot of our new sales tax has not been service-based economy, and a lot of the boom in sales tax has actually been in the service industries throughout the state. So something I'll be keeping an eye on, reporting back to you as we go through the budget session, sort of what we're seeing in the trends. The other thing we're getting a little nervous about is the increasing interest of regional agencies in sort of grabbing tax capacity for their various purposes. We understand it. Everybody needs revenue. As I've talked to you before, the city really only has a few places we can go for revenue, and we're starting to hear other agencies talking about going after sales tax for their purposes, potentially going for property tax measures. And that concerns me just from a standpoint that at some point I think Marin needs to have a really comprehensive discussion about who are we taxing for what, and is it the money actually heading to the right place so that there's a policy linkage to what's going on. And that's true everywhere. But as we've talked about in this room many times, I think there is a level of exhaustion in Marin right now about taxes. true all over the state. Before I give up for comment in a sec, you may have heard April 1st is usually when tax measures that passed in November the previous year kick in. So several cities in Alameda County and one in Contra Costa County hit 10% on their sales tax for the cumulative total, aggregate total of all the sales taxes applied. They required special legislation to actually get up to that target number to be allowed above some of the thresholds that the state has in the law. That's probably the next trend, though, is to actually go to the legislature and ask to go above the cap, because there's just only so many places to go. So I think we're up to 9 communities in the state that are at 10% for their sales tax. Looked like you wanted to.
Yeah,
chime in there.
just had a quick question. Is there an example that causes you particular concern in this last category where there's regional agencies that are kind of appearing in ways that could be threatening to our tax structure?
Well, I think what I'm getting at is you'll see if you watch the Board of Supervisors during the season when they start to talk about what's going to go on the next ballot, they'll start to have groups come forward who will say, for our cause, we would like to see there be a 1/4 cent sales tax or a 1/2 cent sales tax. And there's not been sort of a discussion about what does that mean for everybody else if we move forward with that sales tax and that capacity's gone. Did we direct it to the right place? It's difficult for me. I don't want to get into the politics of any one cause. You know,
No, and I don't want you to. I
Yeah.
just wanted to get a better sense of what it is that you're concerned about.
I just think I understand. If I were leading some of these groups, that's what I would want to do. I mean, they need to generate revenue, and they have nowhere else to go. So that's a logical place for them to go. But there needs to, I think, be this discussion that this is a pie. It's a discrete, finite capacity. It's not an endless. Just keep adding on a 1/4 cent, 1/4 cent, 1/4 cent. And as you know, from watching Measure C, I think cities can show more than any other agency how we can direct that money to what our communities need and want that touches them every single day. And a lot of special interest tax issues don't touch people every single day, and I think that needs to be part of the discussion.
So there's a 2% above the base rate, and are we at 1.5 now?
We are at 1.5, that's right.
Yeah, so
And there's a 2% above the base, and the base was moved up to 7.5%. So 9.5 is the theoretical cap, but Los Angeles County and Alameda County, the cities there have permission to pursue up to 10%, and El Cerrito was given permission to go up to 10% with special legislation.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for the city manager on this item? Actually, since you brought up the sales tax, and it reminded me of an audit that the MTA did on their franchise fees and actually got like an extra, I think they reported $38,000 back. Do we occasionally do a sales tax audit?
So we actually do them quarterly. We partner with a company called Muni Services, and they actually pull down the data from the State Board of Equalization and analyze it for us, and they monitor to make sure we're receiving what we're supposed to be receiving. It's very common in sales tax for there to be discrepancies in what the state passes down in a given quarter. So you have time during the next quarter to deal with the state and figure out what the discrepancy was and reconcile it. And that's actually a pretty common practice, sort of, is with the help of a third party to monitor those discrepancies, spot them, immediately flag them. And we've found the state very cooperative whenever we've had questions about what we're seeing.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I know that with the new sales tax that's just ours,
Right.
that would have been more of a concern because everything else has just been business as normal up until, this most
Until we
recent.
pass that one. But we have anecdotal evidence that it's being administered correctly.
Yeah, the question
that's
is
right.
you're getting.
You don't want to rely on me, though.
I did want to give you, and it always seems like the challenges slide gets a little longer than the other ones, but we do have some things to sort of make you aware of. One is with the economy coming back and agencies, all agencies under pressure to meet all of their obligations and pursue their missions. We're getting a lot of signals that most of the regional agencies we participate in are increasing their budgets. So that has a trickle-down effect. And when one JPA that we participate in says your additional cost Larkspur is going to be $2,000 or $3,000, it doesn't sound that bad, but we belong to, 10 to 15 of these agencies, and if they all ask us for $5,000 or $10,000 additional monies, we suddenly are feeling a pinch. And we're getting some signals that that's the case. The Marin managers are very actively engaging the different regional bodies and asking them to explain what they're trying to accomplish, and we're asking for some justification, and everybody's been responsive and helpful. Some of this is payroll costs throughout the county are going back up now as for the first time agencies are offering some pay increases to folks who hadn't received pay increases in a while. But I already know that TAM, the Transportation Authority, is looking for some increases in their contribution from the cities. We know that the Animal Control Services contract will go up. We know the LAFCO contract's or payment's going to go up because they're actually going to add a staff person, and that each one of these has to be talked about and vetted, but they're going to add up, and they're probably going to add up to $50,000 to $100,000 in additional annual costs for Larkspur. So, just something to be aware of. I don't know if there's a solution, but I do want to let you know your managers are committed to asking the tough questions about why these costs are actually going up. Probably the one that has Ms. Houlihan the most concerned, and our finance director, Kathy Orm, if she was here, is the gas tax is dropping at a precipitous rate. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is it got lowered. The other one is the gas tax been dropping for years, and it's dropping more quickly now because people have been buying new automobiles, which are more efficient, or they don't even use gasoline. So this is probably the hottest topic in the tax world in the legislature. There's a committee now dealing with this very issue. And I alluded to earlier that we know we have different technologies now that can potentially monitor different ways of asking people to pay some sort of fee or tax related to their use of our road system, which is what gas tax is supposed to help. So folks are having a very serious conversation in Sacramento about should we be using these technologies to come up with other ways to charge people for the use of public roads so that we have the money to fix them. But it'll take a while to sort that out and to come up with a new system. And I know the governor has even indicated he'll look at both some short-term and long-term options to try to deal with this. But the league's now telling us that they think gas tax within 2 years could be 23% lower than it was 2 years prior. So that's a pretty serious amount of money for every city to wrestle with. And this is our number one revenue for dealing with roads. And it's something we're very concerned about. Ms. Houlihan could probably speak for an hour on the next topic because we're still trying to wrap our head around it, and I think she's doing an admirable job among the public works directors in the county to try to understand all the new stormwater pollution regulations. Marin County, as a collective, we've been working for several years, all the agencies, to navigate and negotiate through the process to ensure that we have a good permitting process here and that we are permitted with our Water Quality Board for all of our activity. But every time we think we can catch our breath, they add something new. And some of the things they're talking about now in the compliance arena are very expensive, including some retrofitting. I think of almost every storm drain would be necessitated in the next round. Where that money's supposed to come from is an interesting topic that we'll be discussing, but it is something to be aware of, and we're concerned about it. It doesn't mean we don't think it should be done. It's just we're not sure where all the money's supposed to come from for all of this. And as we've talked about many times, we're still battling aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance challenges here in Larkspur, as is all of Marin. a little anecdote, one of the things that's affecting Larkspur right now, as you all know, is the Ross Valley Sanitary District's work on Magnolia. And I guess Ms. Houlihan was sharing with us that when they went in to do the pipe bursting in one section of the pipe, it just really wasn't there anymore. So there wasn't anything to burst because the pipe had pretty much eroded. So that's I think, very illustrative of the challenges we're facing with our infrastructure. We've allowed a lot of infrastructure in Marin to get to that point. Larkspur's no exception. We focus on the roads, but we have a lot of other challenges, and we'll be talking about that a lot during your budget season. And three more, and then I'll be done. The city's reserves, you have a policy that we keep them at 25% of the general fund. We will achieve that reserve in the new budget, but we're starting to get close to 25%. When you put this policy in, we enjoyed about 34%, but you'll recall as part of that policy, in excess of 25% is to be expended on capital need. We've been trying to address some of this aging infrastructure challenge with that excess reserves, but we're starting to run out of those extra dollars to do that. So that's going to require some difficult conversations, I think, during the budget season, not just this year, but in the next couple of years of dealing with some of our capital challenges. CalPERS costs are rising. Do not believe what you're hearing from CalPERS. I'm sorry that where they're saying the percentages are going down of the shares for the employers. The percentages for the shares for the employers are going down because CalPERS took a portion of everybody's unfunded liability and turned it into a lump sum payment outside of the normal cost allocation system. Our true increase this year is 5% on our pension costs, 5% of payroll. So that's a serious hit. In real dollars, it's about $500,000 that will have to be in the budget next year. So we're wrestling with that. And healthcare costs continue to rise. We're continuing to still see 7-8% increases in healthcare costs. So all challenges, those last two are nothing new, although suddenly being hit with a $500,000 lump payment has been an interesting exercise for us on how to plug that into the system. I think we can get over this in 15-16. I think 15-16 we'll be able to present to you a sound budget. We're going to be having a long discussion, I think, during year 15-16 about revenue and finding some other revenue sources because we're going to need them, I think, as we go forward. So there's sort of the state of affairs as we prepare to enter our budget season. I'll finish with your first salvo into the budget will be the CMPA budget, which is being presented last week of April.
Okay, any questions on this slide for the city manager?
No, just thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Yes, thank you. So what's before us tonight is a adjustment of about $115,000, and I see that there's a revenue offset of 117. So is that a reduction in the expense and on the expense side? That was for the revenue due to the new schools. It would be on the last page at the bottom.
Sorry, I'm not sure where you're... yes, this has to do with the fact that our original estimate for revenue for the Twin Cities Child Care didn't take into account, we weren't sure at the time what the impact of the Cove opening would be. We've lost some of our customer base in child care because of the Cove opening. The child care, though, is an enterprise operation, so even though we've lowered revenue expectations, we've also lowered expenditures. We've reduced staff, essentially, to operate at the level commensurate with the revenue.
Mm-hmm. So this budget adjustment actually shows that even with your $115,000 adjustment up for these capital items as well as some workers' comp premium corrections, that the net of it is about minus 2,000.
You could read it that way, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's a good thing.
Across all funds, yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right, so if there are no other questions for the city manager, I'll just need a motion to approve Resolution 2115.
So moved. Adopted of amended budget for fiscal year 2014-15.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Nice job on that. Thank you for the report. Okay, so we have a very short agenda tonight, but one of the things we would like to do is, excuse me, get back to my agenda here. We're going to ask to adjourn the memory of Eleanor Severinghouse. She is the mother of Jean Severinghouse from the Greenbrae Boardwalk, who is one of our frequent attendees and contributors for our meeting and as a bicycle and pedestrian activist. So I'm going to ask that we adjourn in memory of Mrs. Eleanor Severinghouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, and we are done for the evening.